the accounting for appropriation, allotment, and obligation. So during our past discussions, we already talked about these budgetary accounts. And these budgetary accounts normally make use of registries, and these are your appropriation, allotment, and obligation. We have learned before that the government makes use of two types of books. First, the normal books, which your commercial enterprises have, that those are your ledgers and journals, and at the same time, they keep registries. Now, these registries are kept by DBM, Bureau of Treasury, and finally the agency to which the fund will go into. And we already outlined the relationship of those three during our budget process. For today, we will talk about purely how to account for an appropriation, how to account for an allotment, and how to account for an obligation. So the topics that we will cover, of course, is the accounting for your budgetary accounts. Let's start. We talk first and review your different accounting systems. So during our previous lesson, we said that there is an accounting system which is used by the government. And that accounting system is your GUM together with your PPSAS. Now, those accounting systems can be broken down into four. First, you have your budgetary account system, which now accounts for your appropriations, allotments, including your obligations, and your notice of cash allocation. Next, we have your receipts or income and deposit systems. This will talk about your different revenue, including revenue recognition. Next, we have your disbursement system. This is the accounting for your disbursement of funds. So here, we only have an obligation on the budgetary account system. We only have an obligation. In your disbursement system, we will now pay our obligation. We will now disburse money to pay our obligation. And lastly, we have your financial reporting systems. This talks about your different reportorial requirements. Therefore, as we go through your government accounting, these are the items that we will discuss: budgetary accounts, receipt and deposit systems, disbursement system, and financial reporting system. So we are now starting with your budgetary accounts system. So let's start with your budgetary account system. So budgetary account system. So you already know that the books of the government is contained in two general books. First, of course, your journals and your ledgers, which are your normal books. Then we have also your registries. Now, when we talk about your budgetary account system, the registries here are used to monitor the budget. The registries here are used to monitor the budget. And what are the registries that are used in your monitoring of budget? So the registries used in monitoring of your budget are, first, we have your registry of revenue and other receipts. Sir, why do we include revenue and other receipts as part of our budgetary account system? There is no budget that is given by the government to our revenue and other receipts. When we talk about revenue and other receipts, this monitor the revenue and other receipts that are collected by the government. Remember, the budget of a government comes from either a funding from taxes or a funding based on their own revenues. And normally, funding from taxes comes from your appropriations. Now, therefore, we said that this budget, although this budget here in revenue and other receipts come from own revenue, still we make use of it as a budget. I hope you still remember that our budget comes from these two items. Therefore, although this budget does not come from the national government, we make use of that particular funding or the revenue for funding our projects or the government projects and programs. Next, registry of appropriations and allotments. These are now the appropriations, including the allotments given by the national government. So when we talk about appropriations again, please do not forget appropriations. This is from the GAA, allotments, DBM to the particular agency. Next, we have your registry of allotments, obligations, and disbursements. So here we have your allotments, and then next, the incurrence of obligations, and ultimately, the payment of those obligations, your disbursements. Next, we have your obligation request and status. Actually, this should not be included as part of our registries. It is only used as a source document to support our obligations, including their disbursement. Again, it is only a support document. Next, we have your registry of budget, utilization, and disbursement, RBUD. This is used to record the special budget, their utilizations, and disbursement. Okay, RBUD is special budgets. This two, national, from coming from national budget, which is appropriated. This one is your own revenue. And all of these are used for the operations of the particular agency. Later, we will discuss these different items. What are the items, or what should you expect on that particular registry? What should you input on that registry? And we will look into the relationship of each registry together with the other registries. Now, having known the different registries to be used in accounting for our budget, let's look into the fund release documents. So what are these fund release documents? We have two types of fund release documents. You have your obligational authority and then your disbursement authority. When we talk about your obligational authority, this talks about the allotment per se. This talks about the allotment per se. While your disbursement authority talks about the disbursement of the fund. This talks about the disbursement of the fund. So this is a disbursement authorization. Okay. So on your obligational authority, or for the allotment, you already know the agency budget metrics or the general appropriations. And we have your special appropriations. Depending on the type, whether the disbursement will soon need clearance or it does not need clearance. Next, we have your disbursement authority. These are different disbursement authorization given by the DBM. First, you have your NCA. You already know what is an NCA. That is your notice of cash allocation. So what is a notice of cash allocation? It is, again, the authority of the DBM to the particular agency to cover their cash requirements. So DBM to agency. How about NCAA, or non-cash availment authority? Non-cash availment authority is the authority issued by DBM to agencies to cover liquidation of their actual obligations incurred against available allotments for availment of proceeds from loans or grants through supplier's credit or constructive cash. Again, this is an authority from DBM to agencies. This is now the liquidation of their actual obligations. So DBM to agency for liquidation of actual obligations. Next, CDC. This CDC is different from what we have discussed before as a CTC as a control mechanism. Here, CDC as a cash disbursement ceiling, this authority is again to DBM only, to DFA or DOLE to utilize their foreign income for operating requirements. So here, DBM to DOLE or DFA, what will we do, or what will DOLE or DFA do? Utilize foreign income or revenue for operations. And then lastly, We have your notice of transfer of allocation. This is issued by the agency to its regional or operating units. So there will be a transfer of fund from uh, other operating units. So the agency, national agency, will now have an authority for or gives authority to the region or to the other operating units to transfer to other regions or other operating units. Okay, so those are the disbursement authority. But for the purpose of your board exams, normally what comes out only is the notice of cash allocation. We don't normally look into NCAA, CDC, and NTA. Normally, your accounting ends at notice of cash allocation. So now let's look into your different budgetary accounts. So the following are your budgetary accounts. We said your appropriation, allotment, and your obligation. And we already have discussed the difference of those three, the appropriation, allotment, and obligation. Now, how do we record it? Again, we said there are two books. We have your registry books and your journal or ledgers. Now, in appropriation, we said we will record it in the registry of RAPAL, allotment, RAPAL, RAOD, and RANCA. Obligations, we will create an ORS and then we will create a RAOD. And then for NCA, we will record it in your RANCA. Important here is every time there is an appropriation, look for the words that there are appropriations. So here, registry of, so we will lay out the registry again. Registry of appropriation and allotments. Next, we have your registry of allotments, obligation, and disbursement. Next, we have your registry of allotment and notice of cash allocation. And then we also have your ORS. So your ORS is known as your obligation, request, and status. Okay. So to check which registry you will use, what you need to do is you look into the type or the budgetary account. So we have here the three budgetary accounts: appropriation, allotment, and then obligation. So all registries with the word appropriation should be recorded. We will record or we will make use that for any appropriation. So we have registry of appropriation and allotment, registry of allotment, obligation, and disbursement. You also have your registry of allotment and NCA. We also have your obligation request and status. So which particular registry does appropriation is appearing? So it is only appearing in your RAPAL. That's why we will only make use your RAPAL in recording your appropriation. How about your allotment? Allotment is seen on your RAPAL, RAOD, and also in your RANCA. While obligation or the word obligation can only be seen in the registry of allotment, obligation, and disbursement. This is your RAOD. And then obligation word is also seen in your ORS or your obligation request and status. That's why if you try to look at it, the registries in appropriation, since appropriation word can only be seen in RAPAL, therefore the only registry is RAPAL. In your allotment, the allotment word can only be seen in your or can be seen in your RAPAL, RAOD, and your RANCA. That's why we will record your allotment in your RAPAL, RAOD, and RANCA. And then your obligation, you can see the obligation word in your RAOD, including your ORS. Therefore, you will only record your ORS, your obligation in ORS and RAOD. And for NCA, we will only record it in your RANCA because you can only see the word NCA in your RANCA. That's the reason why we will make use of those registries based on those budgetary accounts. Furthermore, take note, for the books, we won't utilize appropriation, allotment, and obligation books. So whenever there is an appropriation, allotment, or obligation, we won't utilize any journals or ledgers, purely registry. But for NCA, we have a registry and your books. Sir, in our books, what is our entry? Your entry is your cash, modified disbursement system regular, and then credit subsidy from national government. You already know the reason why we will use subsidy from national government. Sir, why is our credit subsidy from national government? If you try to look a while back on our different registries and when will we use it, this RAPAL, RAOD, etc. comes from your national government. If you still remember, we have your registry of RROR or RROR. Your RROR is used for your own revenue, while your RBUD is used for your different budgets, utilization, and disbursement. And we said only these three are from your national government. Therefore, when we will make an entry as to your NCA coming from your appropriation, then our entry is cash, MDS regular, and then credit to subsidy from national government. Guys, so long as you know how to make an entry into your receipt of notice of cash allocation, I think you're good to go for government accounting in your board exam in your AFAR, because normally questions relating to government accounting comes only from your introduction to government accounting. Aside from your introduction to government accounting, you will also have questions from your budget process, and finally the recording of your budgetary accounts. Therefore, these are the crucial points or matter that you need to understand in your government accounting in pursuant to your board exam in your AFAR. So take note again, the budgetary accounts and the registries that we will use and whether or not we will make use of your books. So when recording this budgetary accounts, the amount of appropriation is greater normally by your allotment. And your allotment should be less than or equal to the appropriation. That is the rule. Your allotment should not exceed the amount of appropriation. Right? Allotment should not exceed the amount of your appropriation. That's why the rule is the amount of appropriation should be greater or equal to allotment, or the allotment or the amount of allotment should be less than or equal to your appropriation. Furthermore, the rule on your obligation is that your obligation should not exceed the allotment. Your obligation should not exceed the allotment. Therefore, the rule is that allotment must be greater than or equal to obli, or obli must be less than or equal to allotment. It should not always exceed. Why? Because of the control mechanisms created by our government, which is the cash disbursement ceiling. So the ceiling that you can only obligate is the amount of your appropriation and allotment. Therefore, it should not exceed. So if we try to look at it, the whole relationship is that the appropriation should be greater than or equal to allotment, and allotment should be greater than or equal to appropriation. Or vice versa, we have your appropriation or your obligation is less than or equal to your allotment, and your allotment is less than or equal to your appropriation. Please do not forget those rules so that when we account soon, you cannot account a greater allotment than your appropriation, and you cannot account a greater obligation than your allotment. And your NCE should always be equal or less than the amount of your appropriation. because NCA comes from your appropriated amount or upon the release of your allotment. You already know the relationship of those during the discussion on our budget process. Now, we go to your different registries. We try to discuss your different registries. Let's start first with your RAPAL, your Registry of Appropriations and Allotments. I hope you can see the different registries. So let's start first with this portion. So the first column here is your date and your reference. Here is your JA, your SARO or your GARO. You already know which authority gives the gives the authorization as to the usage of the fund. So you will place it there in your reference. What reference is it from your general appropriations, agency budget metrics, or from your SARO, your special appropriation release order? Now, after that, we have your MFO or PAP, MFO or PAP. Your NFO or PAP is a code used by the government. This is more of a code used by the government. We will not talk about the coding of your MFO or PAP. Now we look into your appropriations. So on your appropriations portion, these are the different appropriations on your different objects of expenditures. So these are appropriations on object of expenditures. So for example, the GAA gives an agency the following appropriations. So let's say PS 300,000, MOOE 200,000, FE 0, and then capital outlays 400,000. So the total appropriation is 900,000. So how do we record that once there is already a GAA? So you will place here the GAA. Here in your reference, you place the GAA as a reference, and then you plot the appropriation. So 300,000 for personal services, for MOOE 200,000, and for capital outlays you have 400,000. And you will get the total appropriations. That is 300 plus 200 plus 400,000. We have here 900,000. And normally you will just place here the entity name. Let's say give me an agency, your favorite agency, BIR. So let's say that is the agency BIR, fund cluster. Normally we place regular agency fund, okay? So that's the first part as to appropriations. Next, we have your adjustments on appropriations. Sir, what are the adjustment on appropriations? When we talk about adjustments on appropriations, these are certain adjustments such as realignment, transfer, what else? Withdrawals. So these are types of adjustments. So ETC. Remember notice of transfer of allocation. You can transfer fund from your agency itself to its operating or regional branches. So if there are transfers, then you can account on it on this adjustment on operations. So let's say there is a transfer of MOOE. So let's say there is a transfer of MOOE 50,000. So total adjustments therefore is 50,000. After the adjustment, we will now look into the adjusted appropriations. So since there is no adjustment on the 300,000, our PS is still 300,000. MOOE, there is an adjustment of 50,000. So 200 less 50, we have 150. And then no financial expenses for capital outlays, 400,000. After that, you will have your total adjusted appropriation. Our total adjusted appropriation now, therefore, is 850,000 pesos. 850,000 pesos as our total adjusted appropriations. Now, after our appropriations, the next portion should have been the allotment, meaning you will now, DBM will now allot the money to the particular agency. So in our allotments, this is the allotment portion of our RAPAL. Still, we have your reference, is still JASA or whatever. So let's say JA. And then for allotments, this we said that your appropriations must be greater than or equal to your allotments, or your allotments is less than or equal to your appropriations. So in our adjusted appropriations, we have 300, 150, 0, and 400,000. So based on our adjusted appropriations, our personal services is 300,000, MOOE is 150, and then capital outlays at 400. So those are the amounts. Now for your allotments, let's say what will be allotted only is PS 250, MOOE uh, 80,000, and then capital outlay 200,000. So that is the allotment. So take note, if you look at it, the amount of your appropriation is greater than the allotment. So, or the allotment is less than or equal to your appropriation. So look, your PS, the allotment is 250, while the appropriation is 300. Therefore, that is correct. Your MOOE, 80, the appropriation is 150. Therefore, that is valid. CO, 200,000. The appropriation is 400. Therefore, that is valid. Now, how will we record it in our allotment portion? So, since this is only the amount allotted, 250, 80, and 200,000, you will now place those amounts in that allotment portion. So here, personal services, 250,000, MOOE, 80,000, and then capital outlay, 200,000. Capital outlay, 200,000. So what is our total allotment? 250 plus 80 plus 200, we have 530,000. 530,000. Next, we have adjustment on allotments. Your adjustments again are different transfers, withdrawals, etc. So if ever there is an adjustment, you just place here. Let's assume there is no adjustment. So total adjustments on allotments is 0. Now, since there is no adjustment, whatever is the allotted, that is the adjusted allotments. So we will just copy it to 50, 80, 0, and 200,000. Total allotment is 530,000. Okay? That's how we will make or complete your RAPAL. That is how we will make or complete your RAPAL. Okay. Now, after your adjusted allotments, we have your unreleased appropriations. What is this unreleased appropriations? This is now the comparison of the amount of your allotment to your appropriation. So we said a while back, the total appropriation, let's just place it here. So this is our appropriation. Personal services, 300,000. MOOE versus the allotment, 250. Therefore, the unreleased portion is the difference. So 50,000. MOOE, the appropriation is 150. The allotment is 80. The unreleased is 70. For capital outlay, the appropriation is 400. The allotment is 200. So the unreleased is 200,000. So you place it here. Personal services, the unreleased is 50. Maintenance, unreleased is 70,000. And then capital outlay, the unreleased is 200,000. Total of how much? 320,000. So where did we get the 320,000? That is 850 versus the total adjusted allotments. So that is our total unreleased appropriations. Again, when we talk about unreleased appropriations, that is equal to the difference of your appropriation less your allotments. Appropriation less your allotments. Okay? So take note, How much is our allotment? This is our allotment, 530,000 pesos only. Okay. After we complete our RAPAL, we can already create your RAOD. So for RAOD, we should record the amount of our allotments. So we will create a RAOD per object of expenditure. So if you try to look at it, registry of allotments, obligations, and disbursement, the item here, XXX, should be updated on the type of the RAOD. So that can be personal services, lagay mo dyan, personal services, pwedeng MOOE, pwedeng financial expenses, pwede rin capital outlays. So let's have an example of our RAOD as to your PS. So we said we have EPS of 250,000 pesos. So we will record there the allotment of, let's say, personal services. This is for personal services. We will record our allotment here, 250,000 pesos. We will record our allotment, 250,000 pesos for personal services. Now, let's say we have now your MOOE. We place it again under the allotment portion, 80,000. And if ever our RAOD is CO, we place on the allotment column the amount of our capital outlay allotment, 200,000. Okay? After that, we will now create your obligations. So how do we create your obligations? Sir, what is this UACS object code expenditure? Your UACS object code expenditure is your unified chart of accounts. So this is the chart of accounts created by your COA. So it's a long list of chart of accounts. You just need to look into that. You can research the chart of accounts created by COA for government accounting manual. So that is the item you place here in your UACS object code or expenditures. Okay. Then, sir, how about obligations? You will only place here an obligation depending on our ORS. So you should create an ORS first. And then the unobligated allotments is equal to your allotments less your ORS. Your unobligated allotments is your allotments less your ORS. And then soon, when you have your disbursements, you will record it here. Then due and demandable, and then not yet due and demandable. So when we say due and demandable, this is the payable less the disbursement. And then not yet due and demandable, this is your obligation less your payable. Obligation less your payable. Okay, so that is your RAOD. Then we now create your ORS. So your ORS is your obligation request and status. This will be used in your RAOD. Okay. So again, the obligation portion in your RAOD is completed through your ORS. So ORS is your obligation request status. So your obligation request status looks like this. It looks like this. So there is a serial number. For the serial number, we have 17 digits. So the 17 digits looks like this. So we have the first two digits, and then we have your 8 digits. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that is already 10. And then we have another 4 digits. Is it 17? 2, 16. And then another 2 digits and another 5 digits. 16, 18. It's 23, I think. 10, 14, 16. No, it's only 21. 10, 16 plus 5, 21. Okay. So it is composed of 21 digits. The first 2 digits is your allotment class. So 01 for personal services. And then we have 02 for MOOE. And then we have your 06 for capital outlay. Right? 01 for PS, 02 for MOOE, and then 06 for capital outlay. And then we have your next 8 digits. This is your UACS. You already know what is your UACS, right? That is based on the chart of accounts uh, provided by your COA. And then we have your next 4 digits. This is the year. And then the 2 digits, next digits is the month. And then the last 5 digits is the serial number for the fund cluster. Serial number for the fund cluster. Again, your serial number for ORS is composed of 21 digits. The first 2 digits is the allotment class. So that depends on the type of class, PS, MOE, or CO. Those are the items that we normally use, not much of financial expenses. And then we have your UACS class, and then the month, and then the year. The 4 digits is the year, and then the next 2 digits is the month, and then we have your serial number for the fund cluster. So let's see, we are accounting for your personal services, so 01, and then let's say the funding source code is for clothing and uniform. So let's say that is what we will make use. I don't know the code of that, so let's say 0000. And then we have your year, 2022, the month, April, so 04. And then lastly, the fund cluster. So let's say the fund cluster is, it will come from series of 001. Okay. So if we try to read that one, it means that it comes from your regular agency fund cluster and then general appropriations in year 2022 April series of 001. That's how we will read our serial number. After that, we will place our date and our fund cluster. Normally, our fund cluster is our regular agency fund. And then our payee, whoever our payee, and then the particulars. So let's say your PS is for uniforms. So we place here the particular is personal services uniforms. And then we have your UACS again. And then the amount, if ever we place the amount, whichever is the amount of our obligation, 100,000, for example. So if the amount of our obligation here is 100,000, you should transfer that already here, obligation 100,000. That's the effect of the recording of the ORS. We record it also in your obligations in your RAOD. So the 100,000 here in our ORS will be transferred here in our RAOD under obligations. Okay, so once there is already an obligation, what will happen to our RAOD? 250 less 100, that is our unobligated allotments, 150,000. That is the effect of our ORS. I told you the RAOD, the relationship is that the obligation will come from your ORS. So once we completed this ORS, let's say 100,000, you place here already 100,000, so the unobligated allotment will be 150,000. Okay, that is your ORS. Next, we have your RANCA. So your RANCA is your Registry of Allotments and Notice of Cash Allocation. Do you still remember our amount of allotments? So these are the amounts of our allotments. So we have here PS of 250, MOOE of 80, and then capital outlay of 200, total of 530,000. So we will record that in your RANCA. So how will we record that in your RANCA? So we place that in your allotment receive. So you place here your reference as your PS 250,000 and then MOOE 80,000, and then your capital outlay 200,000. So that is your allotment. Now, as to the amount of your notice of cash allocation, what is the rule? Your allotment should be greater or equal to your notice of cash allocation, or your notice of cash allocation should be lesser or equal to your allotment. So let's say the NCA given is for PS only 200,000, MOOE only 50,000, and your capital outlay only 180,000. So once there is an NCA, you record it here in your receive. So PS 200,000, MOOE 50,000, capital outlay 180,000. Okay? So once you have already utilize it, you place it here. But since we don't have yet a disbursement, the utilization is based on the disbursement. If there is a disbursement, it means it is utilized. If not, it is unutilized. So the unutilized, therefore, since we did not disburse anything, that is the amount also of our unutilized 250 and 180. For unfunded allotment, that is equal to your allotment versus your NCA. So our allotment is 250, the NCA is 200, therefore the unfunded is 50. Our allotment is 80, our MOOE NCA is 50,000, therefore the unfunded is 30. And then the capital outlay, we have 200,000, and then the NCA is only 180, therefore our capital outlay unfunded allotment is equal to 20,000. Okay, so that's how we create your RANCA. And since there is already an NCA given, we will record our NCA in our journals and your ledgers. What is our entry again for our NCA? With debit, cash, MDS regular, credit, subsidy from national government. How much is the total NCA? 200 plus 50, 250 plus 180. So we have here 430,000. 430,000. Okay? So that is how we record your NCA. Okay, so let's take a look again on the whole relationship. So once there is an appropriation, you record the appropriation. So there is an appropriation, you record the appropriation on your RAPAL. Then there will be an allotment. You record it also in your RAPAL together with your RAOD and your RANCA. Okay? And once there is an obligation, you record it to your RAOD only. Once there is an NCA, you record it only to your RANCA. And once there is a disbursement, you record it both to your RAOD and your RANCA as to the utilization. Okay? So those are the books and registries you will use. Again, once there is an appropriation, you record it in the RAPAL. Once there is an allotment, you record it to RAPAL, RAOD, and RANCA. Once there is an NCA, you record it only to your RANCA. Once there is an obligation, you record it only to your RAOD. Okay, so that more clearer picture. So once there is an obligation, you record it to your RAOD and your RANCA. No, on your RAOD only. On your RAOD only. Okay. And once you have already dispersed it, you record it to your RAOD and your RANCA. Okay? So those are the books and registries you will make use in accounting for your budgetary accounts.